All right. See, just mention how everyone's face just starts kind of sagging a little bit. So we are in Exodus, the 20th chapter. Like I said a week or so ago, if nothing else, if you feel you take nothing else from this series, hopefully the next time you say, what are the 10 Commandments? You'll remember that out of habit, they're Exodus, the 20th chapter, because you've turned there so many times throughout the last few weeks. 9 weeks in a row now you've turned there. What is the Ninth Commandment? Shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. How's that sometimes shortened up? What sometimes will we say about this 10th commandment? You shall not what? One word. Yeah, that's absolutely. Shall not bear false witness. Oftentimes that's exactly how we say it versus against your neighbor, because that's the root of it. The other concept I heard from back in this corner was lie. Do not lie, right? Is at the heart of it. Now last week we dealt with thou shalt not steal, and we looked at the concept of dealing honestly with all people. And so there's a lot of overlap, which would make sense, because really the 6 commandments, the last 6 commandments, all deal with dealing well, righteously, in a manner that brings about right relationships with our fellow mankind. So it would make sense that the concepts are somewhat similar to each other, because honesty is that base, that root concept that really all of our relationships are based on, right? Is the concept of trust. So that's where we're at today. What could you tell me about the specifics of this commandment? You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. What's the specifics, that direct application, the primary application of this commandment? Well, yes, exactly. It has to do with court, right? Bear false witness. The primary application is you don't lie against someone in court. You stay truthful. Under the old law, you were found guilty. Now there's, in our society, in our law, there's a little bit more of a burden on physical evidence, right? But under the old law, you were found guilty under the witness of 2 to 3 witnesses, or under the testimony is what I meant to say, the testimony of 2 to 3 witnesses. And so the concept, or a rudimentary element of this concept of law, is that you're not lying against one another. If you would turn your Bibles over to the book of Proverbs 12, verse 17. And Bob, while we turn there, I'll tell you about bearing false witness. Amanda was before your favorite magistrate this week on Thursday, and she was the plaintiff in a landlord suit, and the magistrate asked the defendant, do you dispute any of the charges made? And the answer was no, we do not dispute any of the charges. Makes court kind of simple. So afterwards, he turns to Amanda and says, do you have any comments? And she's just won the case. I said, you didn't talk, did you? She said, I said, no, sir. I have no comments, right? But this concept of words, and there's an idea in Scripture that starts in the very first page of our Bibles, in Genesis 1, that words are more powerful than we give them credit for. And I think that's something that today we just don't think a lot about. But our words have power. Remember in Genesis 1 that God spoke creation into existence. His word has power. It's not without significance then that we are created in His image. And that idea of creating order, of establishing and maintaining order amongst all the chaos, was something that He has endowed or delegated, if you will, to His people throughout all of Scripture. Now, if His word brings about order amongst the chaos, our word should do the same thing, because it has power. It has an impact. And that's really important for us to remember. Proverbs 12, verse 17. Whosoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. Whosoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence. And that honest evidence is not in all manuscripts. So particularly your King James translations will not have the honest evidence, the concept of evidence. But even in the King James, that idea of being at court is there. But a false witness utters deceit. We're talking about beneficial speech. Throughout the book of Proverbs, that idea of the righteous opening his mouth and building up, and the foolish tearing down with their mouth. What do we want to hold up? What do we want to build up with our speech? Don't make it too complicated. It's real simple. Truth and righteousness, right? Truth. Do we ever speak, and we're going to turn over to Matthew 12 in a moment here, and we're going to talk a little bit about idle words. Do we ever speak without knowledge? Do we ever do that in a public format? Let me frame it this way first. Do you think I have a greater burden speaking here today in a public format than I do when I have a one-on-one conversation with, say, my father? Some heads shaking yes. So the burden or the responsibility is greater because the impact's greater, right? In our day and age, what formats do we have to speak to the public at moment's notice? Social media. Social media. Before we go over to Matthew 12 and talk about idle words, and I know I bring this up because a fair amount because it seems like it's just something that our thought processes haven't caught up with yet. When we put out memes or stories in the public format that are untrue, what is that? Go ahead, Sharon. I see your... It's a lie? Is it not bearing false witness? Point being, we as Christians, and we need to be careful of what we post, right? Most, and I know, surely almost everyone dislikes Facebook's fact check. I know I'm not particularly fond of it. I don't feel like I need a company looking over my shoulder like that to do my fact checking for me. But it's there because really there's a need for it, quite honestly. Now this is America, and I had debate with a Christian a number of years ago in Tarentum. I love him dearly. And at the end of the debate, he said, Mike, he said, this is America. You have a right to your wrong opinion. I thought it was great. We got home. It was on a Sunday evening or a Wednesday evening, I don't remember which, after services, and I got home and my phone was ringing, and I answered it. It was Dan. His wife made him call and apologize to me for saying that. Now, my point is that we have a legal right to false information, to wrong opinions, right? When we are making accusations against others, and it's so easy to do today, it consists of hit and share. That's false accusations. Someone shared on my Facebook page a couple of years ago, at the beginning of coronavirus, about how George Soros created the coronavirus. I don't care if you like or dislike George Soros. If you're going to make an accusation against an individual that puts mass murder at the level of Adolf Hitler or beyond, you better have evidence. You better know what you're talking about. Right? It's just one example of many. And my effort in bringing this up is twofold. Number one, to help us to realize how applicable this command is, this concept is, to our lives. It's something we deal with. And also, secondfold, is to cause Christians to be aware, to think about these concepts. Because I can't in turn share the gospel with someone because my word, that power we were talking about earlier, has been degraded. It's been eroded. So it's just things we have to be very, very cautious of, aware of. Questions or comments on that application of those ideas? Let's look at chapter 12 of Matthew, verses 33 through 37, because this is Jesus, and he's not dealing with this commandment directly, but he absolutely is dealing with the same concept. Now, to put it in context, starting in verse 22, they bring a demon-possessed man to Jesus, and he heals him. He casts out the devil. The demon, I mean to say. And some, in verse 23, see it, they're all amazed. And they start to cry out, can this be the Son of David? What is that call? What are they saying? Is this the Messiah, the one we've been waiting for? They are grasping the concept, although a misinformed concept of what the Messiah is. They're grasping the concept of who Jesus is. So, not everyone's happy by that. In verse 24, we have the Pharisees, and they say, no, he's casting out by Beelzebub, which is a name for I believe it was Greek demon. The head of demons, literally, it's Lord of Flies. That always confused me. I saw, Shirley, your face said exactly what mine did forever. But actually, it was a few months ago, a study of hell that helped me understand the Lord of Flies. It's the Lord of Decay. It's the Lord of Death, right? So the Jews in this era are relating this name to refer to Satan, right? The destroyer, the accuser. So that's why Lord of Flies becomes relevant. Sometimes we take these things a little too literal to understand where they were coming from. So basically, their premise is that he's casting out demons by the devil. And Jesus is going to remark on that. Now, as he gets to 33, he's still on this same topic. Would someone read 33 through 37 for us?
Make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and its fruit corrupt, for the tree is known by its fruit. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned.
Okay. Shirley makes a face like, wow. And that's, again, we're on the same wavelength, because those last two verses, that's exactly, wow, right? Wow, that's tough. Let's put it into context. It will not degrade any of the power or the significance of this. But verse 33, Jesus gets at this issue. And notice the phraseology's a little bit puzzling at first. Either make the tree good and the fruit good, or make the tree bad and the fruit bad. He's talking directly to the Pharisees. He's not saying either the fruit tree is good or bad. He's saying either make it good or make it bad. There are two different applications for this I think are both relevant. They are accusing Jesus of being wicked by doing what kind of works? Good works. He's saying, make up your mind. And here is the underlying defense of Jesus' statement. My fruit is good. It's of God. Therefore, I am a good tree. Now, the other application is to the Pharisees. What's proceeding out of their mouth? Wicked, good, or bad? Bad. Simple, right? Bad. Number one, it's a false accusation. It's they're doing exactly what we were talking about, not just to anyone, but to Jesus. Saying, oh, well, I can't deny his power. We can't deny his works. We'll look at what is unseen. Isn't that where false accusations bearing false witness always goes to? The unseen. That's exactly what the Pharisees are doing to Jesus. We can see his works. We're going to call into question the power by which he does them. Now, here is where the application of Jesus to these Pharisees are saying. He's saying either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make it the tree evil and its fruits evil. Now, when he's talking about this, what is he talking about? The end of verse 34. What's he getting at? What makes the tree good or the tree evil? Yep. Kevin says heart or mind. He says out of the heart, which, I'm tapping my heart, but that's not really what he's talking about. Kevin nailed it. Out of our mind, right? Out of our mind. Now, I don't want to go too far into this because I think I'm going to preach on it at some point in the future. 2 years ago in the day camp, I opened our first day camp Devo with this illustration about the trees that we were sitting under. Because kids typically feel completely helpless, right? In many ways they are. Everyone, I think about these babies, they're sitting there peacefully and people pick them up and do things to their face and they toss them around and they handle them back, and no wonder they cry so much. You start jerking me around and, set me down, pick me up, and, all those things, I'd cry too. But kids feel like they're completely at someone else's control. I pointed out to these kids at the beginning of summer camp that we as people, are the only part of creation that has the power to be whatever we want to be. Right? That tree is there. And that's all it ever is. That tree is, what is that down there? Some kind of nut tree, right? It's constantly dropping nuts into the gaga ball pit. Right? It is what it is. Notice Jesus is saying to the Pharisees, either make your tree good or make it evil. He's telling them, you have control over what you are. Wow, what a blessing and what a responsibility. Jesus is saying to these Pharisees, change the nature of your tree. It's not directly what he's saying, it's the application of what he's there saying. It's out of your heart that these things are taking place. You are destroying. That makes your tree an evil tree because your fruit is an evil fruit. By the way, we're going to be dealing with a parallel study of this out of Luke tonight in our lesson on Jesus' tests of faithfulness. But same concept of these trees and the fruit. So, what is the fruit they're producing? I said it was evil, but what is the fruit that Jesus is talking about? Speech. It's their words, right? That's why 36 and 37, most of my life I hone in on that. I'm like, oh wow, every idle word, and that's significant. But Jesus has just said why it's significant. Are we in the process of building up or tearing down? Working for God or working against God? Being helpful, being deceitful. These words all have impacts. Questions or comments on? Just a couple before we move over to chapter 26 and finish up, a couple comments. Notice 34. You brood of vipers. Wow. Jesus gets right at the heart of this. Now, anytime I've ever dealt with in an open class, with how we as Christians should deal with people, and especially, 7-8 years ago, when I started to become convinced and believe firmly that we as Christians need to deal with other people differently than we have or I'll make it personal, than I had. That spreading and sharing the gospel in Scripture looks different than what I realized. I taught a lesson from Ephesians 4:15 where we are commanded to speak the truth in, does anyone know what that verse is? I caught you off guard. In love, right? And I started going through the New Testament teaching about how we are to share the truth and what that looks like. People have brought up and argued vehemently words like this, where Jesus says, "You brood of vipers." Now, this, I think, is an important fact. Who's Jesus talking to when he says that? The Pharisees, which is an important distinction from the Jews as a whole. The Pharisees are always the people he talks to like this, because they're tearing people down. They are treating people like the argument is that I just described, and I understand it's a bit of a straw man, but the argument, they're treating people like the argument is we should treat people. It's those people that Jesus went after and berated, no one else. How do you think it felt to be the average Jew standing on the corner watching this, with the Pharisees having browbeat you and beat you down and smacked you down, made sure you knew you were worthless and not worthy of God, and certainly in no way measured up to be like them? To hear Jesus turn to him and say, "You brood of vipers, you're evil." Do you think the rest of those Jews, the majority of those people, the multitudes that end up following Jesus, were like, "He's got our back"? Wow, that was good to hear someone stand up for me. Because that's not how Jesus was dealing with all those people. I think it's part of the equation for 36 and 37. The message is to the Pharisees that you are going to be held accountable for every berating, destructive, and unfounded accusation that you make. That's the primary application for what Jesus is saying. You brood of vipers, verse 34, to me, at this point, from the time I was, young adult, pre-adult, through, 10, 12 years ago, I took that to being bold. You've got to say it exactly how it is, even if it's hard. Now I take that phrase, so same three phrases, to say, Mike, you better be careful. You better watch how you treat people. So I believe that's the message that Jesus is getting across. Questions or comments on "you brood of vipers"? I don't mean that. You brood of vipers. Any questions on that comment? If I start calling you a brood of vipers, there will be comments, right? Yeah, that's just simply not true. So we're good. How can you speak good when you are evil? He's talking about the heart, right? Later, Matthew 6, we'll see later in the lesson, Jesus uses the same thing about our eye. When we see people a certain way, we're going to treat them a certain way. Jesus saw not just their shortcomings, he saw their struggles that brought about those shortcomings. 35 is an elaboration upon that, we can only give out of our heart. So we're going to treat people accordingly. So with that, let's go over to 26. Matthew 26. When, this starts early, when you're in trouble and you're called on it, what's the first instinct to do? To say. Mike, did you break the lamp? See, I told you. I knew that would be his first response. No! No. I think maybe Mike did not break the lamp recently. But the first instinct is always to lie, isn't it? It starts really early. It amazes me how early it starts. Christian, was just barely walking. I know that you'll give me poor parenting marks, but it is what it is. He's mostly survived to this point of life anyhow. But he would wake up in the house. We had Mondra on. We were out doing barn work because I had to get mostly done before I would leave, go shoeing, and let Amanda finish it up. She would go in then, dress him, bring him out. He'd be around while we're doing barn work. Oftentimes he would get either cold. He's probably 2.5, 3 years old. He'd get cold or bored or what have you, and he and Willie, our dog, who was a puppy at the time, would go back in the house. And Amanda would give them a little bit of time, half hour or so. A lot of times Christian would get himself some bread or something in the morning. We walked in together one morning. I was going to change my boots, Amanda and I, and Christian had already been in, and he had a stack of bread. It was basically a whole loaf, that tall, with cream cheese between each pair. And Willie's standing under him, looking up, and Willie is smeared with cream cheese. I mean, just has cream cheese from, not anywhere his tongue could reach, but from the end of his tongue back, Willie was covered in cream cheese. I said, Christian, what happened? Now, he's standing on a stool at the counter with a butter knife and all the evidence, he's got this sandwich. I think he thought he was going to eat it. I said, what happened? He looked around, he thought a second, and he points down and says, Willie. It happens early, doesn't it? I'm going to leave you with this subtle point. Oftentimes we think a lack of research questions or a lie, flat out lie, bolsters our position, helps us out. I'm going to read these verses quickly. You're familiar with them, and I'll leave the message with you before opening it to questions. Starting in verse 69 of Matthew 26. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, you also were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you mean. And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. 73. After a while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you are one of them, for your accent betrays you. Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know the man. Immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Questions or comments on bearing honest witness? Thank you for your time.